Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about formatting output using format strings, or what they also call F strings. So format strings are going to be one way for us to format our output a little differently. It's something that years ago didn't exist in Python, but they've put that in there. It does make our lives a lot easier when it comes to formatting. So we'll take a look at the syntax shortly here, but just very quickly. The two advantages, first of all, it's going to allow you to be more precise, especially with numbers. So for example, let's say I want to print out a number and I only want to display a certain number of decimal places. Format strings would be one way for you to achieve that without changing that underlying variable's value. Another way that we might use that is, let's say we have an extremely long number and we want to put commas in there, as you would in the United States when we write very long numbers. You could certainly do that as well. And let's say, as another example, we want to display something that is using percentages. Instead of displaying 0.05, you want to display 5%. All of this can be accomplished using format strings. The other thing is, and this becomes more and more important the more complex your print statements are going to be. If you've ever tried to print a variable plus some text plus another variable plus some text, you probably noticed that it can be kind of a pain to string those together, and you end up with a lot of quotes, you end up with a lot of commas. Format strings are going to allow us to fix that. So let's take a look here, and I'm just going to move this down so you can see on the screen here. I'm going to start with creating two variables here. So start by creating those numbers, and you've probably been able to do this before where you go out there and say print name. Just print whatever the value is of that variable. Now, format string can also do this exact same thing, but once I show this to you, you're probably going to say, well, this doesn't make a lot of sense, it's more complicated, and you'd be 100% correct. So to do a format string, before you put your what you want to print, you start with a F quote, and then any variable name would appear inside of brackets. Now both of these are going to do the exact same thing, and again, given the choice here, I would pick the first one. But let's give this a run and just make sure that it does give us what we expect, and it does. So at this point, you might be saying, well, format strings are not very useful. Let's take a look at another example. Let's say I want to take this information and I want to construct a sentence. So let's say I want to say hello, then the name, and we'll say I also like the number, and then fave number. And let's throw on a period there also. Now, again, notice at this point, maybe you start to see a little bit of the problem. There's a lot of commas and, open quotes, close quotes. And a lot of times when I teach intro to programming, this is going to be one of those errors. You end up with people, oh, I missed this, and now everything's all messed up. But let's take a look at the output of this here. It should be fine. And you can say, hello, Eric, I also like the number 52. Notice it throws in that extra space there. That's just the way the print statement's going to do things by default. So there are ways to adjust that, but for the moment, let's take a look at fixing this with a format string. So this is where the format string is going to show a little more power. So again, I'm going to start with F quote, and I'm going to write just like a sentence here. And anything that's a variable, so in this case, name or fave num, if I want to use those, I just throw them in the curly braces. So hello name, I also like the number, fave number, period. And you can see the trade-off here. You end up with, okay, I got to remember these curly braces, but it a lot less lining things up. And there will be one hidden advantage here, and that's the period after fave num will be gone here. And you can see the difference there, but aside from that, it's the exact same thing. So these two do basically do the same thing. Now, one big mistake, and I just want to show this because I see it a lot, is that if you forget the F in front of the string, it's going to treat this as text. So what you're going to end up with is hello, and then exactly what you see here, curly brace, name, curly brace. I also like the number, curly brace, fave num, curly brace. It's going to show those instead of the values of the variable. And you can see, obviously not what we're looking for. So just make sure that if you intend to use these format strings, that you are starting with that. So this would be one way that we can use these, but it's absolutely not the only way. So let's say we have a variable such as pi. Notice pi is a constant. Pi is not changing, so I've put in all capital letters. And we could certainly go in there and say, using an F string, value of pi is pi. And that would work exactly the same as you would expect. But one of the other things that we're able to do with format strings is we can control the number of decimal places. Now, if you recall, decimal numbers can sometimes be referred to as floating point numbers. So let's say I want to print out the value of pi to 2 decimal places. Now, if you're more advanced, you know there's other ways to do this, functions, methods, etc. But within these curly braces, we also have the ability to use this colon marker, and we could follow that up with certain identifiers. So in this case, point 2f, make sure that that is inside the curly braces. This is going to say, display this as a floating point number with 2 decimal places. It doesn't change the underlying pi value, but instead of printing 3.14159, it's then going to print 3.14. So, and you can see that works out pretty well there. Now, we can also use it because it will round. So if I were to once again do this, remembering to start my format string, so if we set 0.4f, and we close that off, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this will round, at least in terms of display. Again, it doesn't change the value of pi, it's just changing the way it shows up on the screen, like, putting on a pair of glasses or something. So this will round, so 0.59 will become 0.6. And you can see that's one way that we're able to take that same value and display it a little differently. Now, we can also do this if we were to do, let's say we want to display things as percentages. Instead of displaying 0.07, maybe we want to display 0.07, and let's say, let me just look this up to be certain, but I think Delaware, let's see. Yeah, they don't have a sales tax rate. So in Delaware, instead of 0.07, it would just be 0. Now, let's start by saying, let's print these out using the format string. And sales tax in New Jersey. Sales tax in Delaware. And we'll see that that shows up like this. Now, for consistency's sake, we might want to make sure it displays with this. Everything displays with the same number of decimal places, and we could certainly do what we did here. But specifically because these are percentages, we might want to display them as their percentage. Now, you could certainly go in and multiply by 100 and throw on a percent sign. You could certainly do that. But again, this is here and it's available. So I'm going to go inside those curly braces. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say, in this case, we want to say, let's do 0.1, and we're going to put a percent. So again, this is going to be one of those things that's going to be built in, and likewise 0.1%. And you can see now everything is displayed with a consistent format. So, it's a good practice to go in and, like let's say we're charging sales tax. Instead of saying, oh, I think New Jersey is technically like 0.6625 or something weird at this point, 6.6625, or it's a very long, weird number. You don't need to see it to 10 decimal places. So this would be a way for us to format that a little differently. And likewise, if I'm paying sales tax on an item, I don't care that I'm paying 0.418365 cents. I care about, what are the whole amounts. And who knows, soon enough, maybe we're getting rid of the penny, it sounds like. So maybe it'll be even rounded up even further. But this way you can see that is our output, and we can go in there and tell it to do 1 decimal place. And, New Jersey was 6.625. You can see it shows that 1 decimal place. Again, this allows you to do consistency in your output. Now let's take a look at one more example here with numbers. Let's say we have a very large value. And we'll go in and we'll do our normal print using the format strings. Now if we want to, we can go in there and we could tell it to insert commas. Now keep in mind, I'm in the US, so it's going to be using US-based markers. Python's going to use your localization settings. So if you're in a country where maybe you're using periods instead of commas, that will be accounted for based on your system. But in the US, at least, I could do a colon and put a comma. And what that's going to do is tell it to automatically insert commas. And that way I don't have to go in and say, okay, there should be a comma there, and there should be a comma there, and there should be a comma there. And you can see it automatically handles that for us. So These can be combined. Again, this is intended to just be kind of an intro, but these are the ways that you can use format strings, and you're able to use those to maybe format some values. Keep in mind, I'll have the link to this on GitHub for your perusal if you'd like to download this final code. Thanks for watching. Take care.